and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News. It's our weekly roundup of some of the stories that are making headlines all across northern Michigan. And joining me at the table this week, Marisa McKay from 9 and 10 News. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And John Flesher from the Associated Press. John, thanks for coming back again.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good to see both of you. We are, as I told Marisa right before we started, it's our first and last day of spring as we're getting a brief reprieve from the weather, more heading our way. But we've been talking a lot about the cold weather, the ice, the fact of whether the bay is frozen over or not. An ice cover has been a story, John, that you've been kind of covering the last couple of weeks. Tell me what your take on that story has been.
Right. Well, I've been following it from the, I guess what you might call the macro level from the Great Lakes system as a whole. The Great Lakes have approached the level of being completely frozen over, the surface of the level of the lakes. They haven't gotten to that point. Last week seemed to be about the peak, and they reached about 88 to almost 89% of the entire surface area from Lake Ontario all the way over to Lake Superior as covered over with ice. And it's the most extensive ice cover that we've had since 1994, when it got up to about 94%. So obviously this has attracted a lot of attention. And the story that I put together last week sort of went beyond just the numbers to try to put a handle on what this means. And there are a number of ramifications for ice cover that extensive. Some having to do with the economy. For example, it puts a lot more pressure on the Coast Guard to make sure that there are shipping lanes that remain open. Of course, most of the shipping in the Great Lakes region will shut down this time of year, the iron ore, coal, that type thing, because the Soo locks are closed. But there are still some commodities that need to move, primarily heating oil and road salt, two things that we all appreciate up here.
Yes.
And so they have to make sure that the lanes are open. And the Coast Guard has a fleet of 9 icebreakers that has been hard at work, particularly up around the Straits of Mackinac, on the St. Mary's River, linking Lakes Huron and Superior, and the St. Clair and Detroit rivers, linking Huron and Lake Erie. So it has been a busy time for them. I went up and spent some time with the Mackinac crew up in Sheboygan and talked with them about what they were, kind of the things that they were encountering, the difficulties, the thickness of the ice, things like that. They're tired, but they're working hard and doing quite well. And we also looked at how this is affecting tourism. We looked at up at the Apostle Islands in northern Wisconsin, where some incredible ice sculptures have formed in some of the caves along the Lake Superior shoreline, just like some of the ice caves we've seen here, although the ones here are sort of forming out of ice along the lake shore, whereas up there the caves are sort of existing, and what's happening up inside them is these incredible sort of sculptures that form just from the water drip and the freezing ice. Some of them are incredibly intricate and beautiful, and people are just going by the thousands to look at them, because usually you can't get to them because there's no shore access. But now with the lake frozen over, people can walk more than a mile to get out and look at these caves. And the superintendent of the national park up there told us that usually they may get 500 to 1,000 people over the winter up there, but this time they've had 35,000 and counting. It's been pretty amazing. So that has a ripple effect on the local economy, things like that. So really, what's interesting is the way that Great Lakes ice cover has this ripple effect, where it affects a lot of things. There's also talk among scientists that it might have some effect on lake levels and evaporation rates, things of that nature. So it's quite a fascinating story.
Yeah. I want to talk more about the ice caves with you, Marisa, in just a second. But John, we had our own little micro problem trying to figure out who decides when the bay is frozen over. But in terms of all of the Great Lakes, who's the official source for that? Is that NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, that makes that call? Right.
They have a laboratory, Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory down in Ann Arbor, and they track the ice cover on a daily basis using satellite data, and there's actually a website where you can check daily where they have a map of the Great Lakes region and different shades showing what the ice cover is, and so they're kind of the official referee that we're all using to to determine just how thick the ice is.
Gotcha. Well, Marisa, John mentioned ice caves up north, tourism. Both of those are issues that you've kind of been following here locally in Leelanau County. Take us to the ice caves. Tell us what we can expect and what you notice when you're out there.
Well, they're very beautiful. They're really wonderful to see, but I would say that they're pretty treacherous to get to. I mean, like, I don't know about the Apostle Islands, but up at our ice caves, you have to walk about a mile from shore just on the ice, and then the ice caves have kind of formed up and over, so you almost have to kind of climb down a little bit. And there are some areas where it kind of is a gradual thing, but we did hear that somebody fell from trying to get down more, I guess, in a quicker, more roundabout way. So people do need to be very careful, wearing proper footwear, making sure that you are not just going to go in the ice caves without checking the ice because it's a little bit thinner in there. So while they're really pretty to look at, they're kind of causing a little bit of a public safety issue for the police and the Coast Guard up there.
Yeah, we talked with a firefighter, I think on Monday, who was out there this weekend, and he was just almost in a panic just being out there, because he was out there to observe and be among the spectators, but as a firefighter, he said he was just pretty nervous for all the people out there.
Exactly.
Nobody really knows how sturdy that ice is going to be.
Exactly.
They heard a huge crack and a huge pop overhead, and saw one of the caves, crack right overhead.
Right.
So it's a little nerve-wracking.
Well, I was planning to go out there myself this coming weekend, so have the authorities made any sort of official pronouncement about whether they would prefer that people go or not, or is it just a matter of be cautious?
It's just be cautious.
From
at this
what
point,
we've heard, I think the Sheriff's Department is trying their best to work with people and sort of direct traffic up there while they can, and spread the word about being safe while they can, because they know people are going to go, so they might as well kind of work with them versus saying no, it's we're not allowing you to go, because people will find a way to get there if they want to.
The warmer weather today and Wednesday and Thursday concerns me a little bit too, just knowing what that's going to do to the stability of it as well.
Exactly.
Tourism's been an issue up at the ice caves too, both positive and negative.
Right. I think some of the neighbors up there, we've just heard again from the Sheriff's Department, they're getting a little restless with just all the activity. I mean, it's a pretty quiet area, pretty narrow roads, especially with all the snow that we've gotten, and it's been quite busy up there. But Fisher's Happy Hour Tavern, which is located kind of right at the intersection of Gills Pier Road, which is the access point at M22, we talked to them on Monday, and they broke even pretty much for the winter season in just the 3-day President's Day weekend, because they of so much activity and so much demand. And we also heard that some restaurants down in the Suns Bay area were kind of having to share supplies. I ran out of napkins, I ran out of hamburger buns, or one completely ran out of food because they just weren't expecting all of these people and all these visitors.
Wow.
Which is great for them. It's a pretty quiet time of the year, so.
That is good.
Nice problem to have.
Right.
Yeah. Not a pleasant problem, but you do have to share the story that you told me earlier about the neighbors complaining.
Oh, yes. The Sheriff's Department, again, says that they are thinking about bringing porta potties or some sort of temporary toilets down to the ice caves, because there are no bathrooms. I would say the closest bathroom probably is Fisher's Happy Hour Tavern, which is 3 miles back by the time you're out at the ice caves. And people are relieving themselves anywhere they can, and some of the neighbors who that even might be their property or live there, they're not too happy about it, which I could understand that. And there have been a lot of pets, a lot of dogs out there. I guess they're relieving themselves too, and people aren't really cleaning that up as much as they should, let alone their own things. So
damaging the beauty of the ice caves.
Yes.
One step at a time.
Yes.
Well, another ice-related issue, another ice problem, is the roof damage. We were talking about that as well. Benzie County had just 3 structures in a 24-hour period that kind of collapsed under the weight, and that's really a factor for all of us to kind of just be aware of. But you were down in Benzie for that story as well this week?
Yeah, I was, and the emergency manager as well as the building inspector were both down there, and just kind of made the observation that in Benzie and the Beulah, Benzonia area, especially downtown, it's a lot of older structures, a lot of buildings that, especially if they're vacant, all that snow's just been piling up, and it's just, they're kind of waiting for more to happen at this point, especially with the rain that's expected. They said that, the snow that's already built up on people's roofs could just absorb it like a sponge and add to the weight. So they're expecting a lot more, either collapses, partial collapses, ice jam, buildups, everything. They're kind of just waiting, see what happens.
We did a story or an interview the other day with insurance agents talking about this roof damage. And one thing I didn't think of, and it seems like common sense now, but I thought, well, what if I just go up and scrape half the snow off, at least get some of the weight off, and try to just ease the burden. And basically implored me to not do that. And he said,
really?
The snow distribution, the distribution of weight, if you just leave all the snow on the back half of your roof or on the left half versus the, the east versus west, distribution can just cause the whole thing to collapse.
Oh my gosh.
Even more. And
glad to know
yeah, it makes sense, but
Yeah.
I thought to myself, I'll go off and spend an hour and whatever I get done will be great. But no, it's almost worse to just do half a job. And
My goodness.
he said they've had already, garage roofs collapse this season because people have scraped the snow off the front half of the
Right.
garage, but then all the weight is on the back, so
Oh
it just
my
buckles.
gosh. Yeah.
And insurance claims are already coming in, so that's a problem as well.
Scary prospect.
not
I'll
fun to
keep
think
an eye on
about.
my garage.
John, I want to ask you, we'll change gears here. I want to ask you about something that the governor talked about a couple of weeks ago, and it has to do a little bit with the Great Lakes. As we have talked often about invasive species, we've talked about the Asian carp, and there are others out there that are causing concern. But governor wants to spend some state dollars to address some of these concerns without, presumably, I'm guessing, without waiting for the Army Corps to make a decision and take some action.
Right. Well, when the governor released his budget proposal a couple of weeks ago, he he proposed some new funding for work on invasive species. And what was interesting to me was that he was not so much dealing with Asian carp in this instance because there's been so much attention paid to them in recent years. And the federal government has been taking the lead on that. But there are a lot of invasive species out there, and those just being ones that are not native to the area, but they come in, they have no natural predator and can just really take off and displace the native species, both plant, animal. And there are more than 200 of them in the Great Lakes Basin. Now, what the governor's people were concerned about is that so often the approach that we have seems to be reactive. You wait until an invasion is well underway and then you sort of jump in and try to do something about it. And their thinking is, what can we do, if anything, to sort of get out ahead of the curve and prevent these things from getting so bad? And so what the governor called for was about $14 million over the next couple of years. They'll be using this to hire probably about 16 more people in some of the departments like the DNR, DEQ, the Department of Agriculture. And also trying to set up a better system of working with local organizations that are there, to use the cliche, boots on the ground, who are out there observing watersheds, observing wetlands and other areas where invasive species will be spotted first, so that they can have these rapid response efforts to try to get out ahead and prevent the types of things that we've seen. We all hear about the Asian carp. We're familiar with the zebra mussel and the quagga mussel and all the effect that they've had in the lakes. Down in the Saginaw Bay area, not as much an issue here is the Phragmites, those big, tall, thick, sort of reed-like plants that can come in and just completely take over a shoreline landscape. We've done a pretty good job of keeping them out in the Grand Traverse area as opposed to what's happening down there, but that's a concern. You've heard of the emerald ash borer, of course, that little nasty Asian beetle that came in and believed to come in some packing material in the Detroit area at a port and spread and has really just devastated ash trees in our state and many others. In each of these cases, the approach was sort of reactive, trying to sort of get caught up after the problem had already gotten very severe. And I had an interview with Keith Cray of the DNR a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about this sort of silo mentality, of dealing with one problem at a time, as opposed to having a more comprehensive, strategic approach. And so that is their hope, to try to get all the departments that are involved in these things working together, to have people who are focusing on getting ahead of the problem. Like, for example, perhaps some extra inspectors down at the ports who would be looking at products as they come in as packing material and things, looking for places that invasive species might be lurking, that type thing. That is their hope, and we'll see how it comes to pass, and we'll see if the legislature goes along with the proposal. But it is the Nature Conservancy said at the time that it would be among the most significant new funding for natural resources programs in about 30 years. So it'll be interesting to see if it is approved.
Do you know yet if there are local groups that have joined in that conversation in the Grand Traverse area, or is it too early in the stage
Mostly there are groups both here, like for example, Tip of the Mid up at Petoskey that weighed in a very positive way. They're happy to see it. What they're waiting to see if it's going to come to pass. You know, if it's just a talk at this point, it's on the drawing board and see what happens. But one part of this proposal that I think local groups are happy about is that there would be a system of grants whereby local groups could apply for grants from the state to have some of their own local projects aimed at either preventing species invasions altogether or containing them once they happen and dealing with them, keeping them local. These groups say that, you know, we're the ones who are out there. Often we'll spot something, get word to the state, and the response has been a little bit lethargic on the part of the state. So we need more help locally, and this plan would include some of that. So we'll see if that comes to pass.
Very good, very good. Marisa, let's turn back over to you because I know you've been working on a longer form story that's airing, you said, tonight, right? It's a special piece for the ratings period on prescription drug abuse. Tell us the story. What are you working on for tonight?
Yeah, so we did kind of separated things into two parts. So the first part will kind of paint the overall picture, which really isn't a positive one. It's pretty negative and pretty scary when you think about some of these statistics. But we spoke to the Michigan State Police, who have 4 drug task forces working in northern lower Michigan to sort of combat the prescription drug problem because it has gotten to be such a concern. We also spoke to a therapist from Munson's Behavioral Health Services, Addiction Treatment Services, as well as a pharmacist, just kind of learn, you know, how is this problem becoming so prevalent in our area? What are the demographics that you're paying attention to? And a lot of these people said that kids, it's young kids who are experimenting, who are, you know, taking extra Vicodin maybe after surgeries, or it can start kind of innocently and then, you know, soon you're a full-blown addict. So we've learned that more people are actually dying from prescription pill, whether that's overdoses or just other ways of abusing these medications, than they are in traffic fatalities, which is a pretty frightening thought. Wow. And so then, you know, just kind of combat that, then the second part of the story, which will air at 11, the first part airs at 6, the one at 11 will sort of talk about the hope that's out there, that there are several ways that you can get help for this problem in our community, what these people are doing to try to be proactive and not sort of reactive, which is reaching out to kids before the abuse becomes part of their lives. So,
wow. What was there a fact or something you learned that was maybe most surprising in working on that story?
I think it was the fatalities, the traffic fatalities statistic, but we also learned that for Michigan State Police, the number of deaths for kids relating to this has quadrupled in the last 10 years. So that's why they're focusing so much of their effort on, you know, so much, I guess, more of that DARE mentality, getting to them and educating them when they're young. When I was in high school, prescription pill abuse wasn't even discussed when it came to distracted driving, and now it is. So it just goes to show you that in the span of, you know, I've been out of high school for going on 6 years, this has become such a problem.
Right. That's a big deal. I want to maybe have you just briefly cover for us what goes into a story like that, because two-part series, it's airing tonight. You didn't start working on it this morning or yesterday. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. How long of a process is that? And take us through that if you would.
I would say it's about a 2-month-long process when all's said and done, just to kind of, when you start brainstorming your ideas and you decide, of course, there's a hierarchy process where you have to get stories approved by management, and then you can start making your phone calls. And oftentimes you have an idea in your mind of how you want the story to go, but then because somebody might suggest another source that you should talk to, the story can kind of develop and snowball, and that's why it became a 2-part series, because we wanted to make sure we covered all of our bases. And there was still more that I wanted to do. I wanted to talk to Judge Haley at the drug court just about some success stories maybe he's seen, or I also wanted to speak to more of the schools and what are you doing on campus, whether that's a college or a high school. So the story, I think, could have even been bigger, maybe even 4 parts if we wanted to. But then you have to go through setting up interviews and kind of making sure that you can set time apart in your day, whether you get a full day off of your beat to do your interviews and shoot your video. So there's a lot that goes into it, especially from the TV side. We have to make sure that we're telling a story visually as well as just with our interviews. So it can take a while.
You've got a photographer as well that works with you and helps with editing and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's, like I said, there's a lot that goes into it.
Right.
It's a lot of hours involved. But you also, like you said, you've got to do that at the same time you're doing your other job, the other story of the day.
Yes, exactly. So on Monday, the photographer that I work with, he went up to Leland and shot a story, and I stayed back and wrote some of my sweep stories and made sure that all of that was good, and we have to get our scripts approved as well. So that process happened, and then he came back and started editing, and I started writing the story for the day. And then yesterday, I went up and shot a story by myself, and then he stayed back and edited the sweep story. So it was very much a teamwork kind of effort there.
Yeah. Props to the photographers.
Yes.
All the time. Very good. Well, good. And I guess lastly, let's end with you, John, because I want to give you a chance to talk about another story that you've been following, not necessarily a local story, but you were telling me about it before we sat down. Interesting story down in Battle Creek about some folks who are taking some action on their own and getting results with Kellogg.
Yes, this was an environmental story of sorts involving a very prominent Michigan company, Kellogg. We're all familiar with Kellogg's cereals and Pop-Tarts and Pringles and all the other snack foods that they produce, a huge food processing company now. And there is an ingredient that goes into a lot of the foods that they and others in the industry produce that you don't hear much about, and it's called palm oil. And palm oil is used both as a minor ingredient in a lot of products, and also used in some of the cooking of some of these foods. And the problem is that most of it comes from Southeast Asia, and a lot of it increasingly has been produced in plantations that are displacing some of the rainforests, the tropical rainforests, that are such absolutely essential areas for both limiting carbon output into the atmosphere. They are carbon sinks that retain a lot of the greenhouse gases, and also provide habitat for some of the endangered species of the world, like a particular type of tiger and the orangutan, both that are highly endangered. And so activists have been trying to get the food industry to not stop using palm oil, but to insist that it come from sustainably cultivated areas, and there are ways to do that to avoid mowing down the rainforests, and there are other steps that one can take. Last fall, they had a rally down at the Kellogg headquarters in Battle Creek. They had people with Tony Tiger outfits on, things like that, petitions, big cereal bowls, and so forth. And they had an audience with some of the company officials, and it bore fruit, because the company just announced that, in fact, they are going to have a new policy that will require their suppliers of palm oil to be able to document, to trace all the way back to where they got the oil, and to make sure that it complies with good sustainability standards, and not just environmental standards, but also standards for human rights for the people who work on the plantations. So they got some really good pats on the back from the groups that have been lobbying them. So one of those sort of unusual win-win, feel-good type stories where activism paid off, and it seems to be everyone's happy.
It's kind of remarkable to think about your morning Pop-Tart and causing a problem for the rainforests, but obviously they've proven it's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and they've shown that there are ways to deal with those kinds of problems when people sit down and work together, and you can sometimes still have the economic benefit from that, but to protect the environment as well, and this seems to be one of those cases from what we're hearing.
Any idea when this change will take effect? I assume it's a gradual process. It's
Yeah,
not gonna be tomorrow.
they have Kellogg's set a deadline for the end of 2015 to have all of their suppliers in compliance, or for those who are still having trouble, to at least show that they're well on the way to complying and just sort of fixing any bugs with the system. So, a couple of years, basically, to phase this in is what they're looking at.
I don't know if it's the journalist or the pessimist or what, but it makes me wonder, Kellogg may stop doing this, but is there another company in line now that will just take over and continue taking down the rainforests?
In fact, the major supplier, the biggest supplier of palm oil is a Chinese company. And they had sort of a partnership of sorts with Kellogg, and Kellogg did try to influence them. And in fact, that company also made a very similar announcement just a month or so ago. So it seems to be what I'm told by some of the activist groups is that when the big players start to come around, it sets trends that others are going to follow. So they seem to be pretty optimistic about this, but of course there's a ways to go yet, and it won't be solved overnight, but good progress.
Well, I want to thank you for tuning in, and I want to thank our guests for this week, John Flesher from the Associated Press. You can see your work just about everywhere. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And Marisa McKay from 9 and 10 News. Marisa, your story airs tonight, 9 and 10 at 6 and 11.
Yep.
And if you miss it, I'm sure it'll be online, right?
Yep.
9and10news.com. Thanks everyone for tuning into the Briefing Room. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio. Have a great day.